Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game from the Prague Chess Festival, the Masters Edition. It's young Krzystzof Duda versus Alireza Firouzja. I don't even have to point out that it's a wild game since the two of them are playing. I bet you're already expecting it to be a wild game. I just have a little bit of info regarding the candidates tournament that's going to start in March. It seems that Russia put a ban on people from China from entering Russia. So Dingliren and Wang Hao might have some problems actually attending the candidates tournament as is being played in Yekaterinburg in Russia. But I don't think there's a very likely chance that they will not be able to enter. But just in case it happens, you will know why there are 6 players instead of 8 players in the candidates tournament. Although it does seem very unlikely that who wouldn't allow 2 chess players from entering their country regardless of the disease they're carrying. We'll just have to wait and see. And also, I've acquired Anand's new book, The Mind Master. I just started reading it today. Got through first 20 pages right now before actually recording this video, and it's actually a very well written book, and it seems like an awesome book. I'm planning on finishing it tomorrow, so if you were considering acquiring it or you had doubts, it is a good book, so just in case you're wondering. Now that being said, let's check out the game. Duda with the white pieces opens with c4. The English opening is on the board. We have c6, knight f3, and d5. Striking in the center, sort of the Caro-Kann setup against the English. We have e3 and knight to f6. Knight to c3 and now e6. We have b3 preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop and bishop to d6 now. Bishop to b2 by Duda, with castles by Firouzja and queen to c2, just continuing development, and now e5. Since white allowed it, why not, already have a way of developing your light square bishop as well. Bishop to e2 by Duda, not even bother to play d3 to prevent e4. He just continues and he basically invites e4, which Firouzja, of course, does. Why wouldn't you play this? You free your dark square bishop as well, and you force white to play some fishy moves. So knight to g5. And now there is one game in the database where bishop to f5 was played, but here Firouzja plays h6. He says, okay, that's a weird looking knight, get it away from there. And it is as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So what happens next? We have h4. Duda offers a full knight, and we reach the position from the thumbnail. So what happens if the knight is captured? Well, if captures, you have to go somewhere with the knight, most probably knight h7, and then f4 is very strong because you pretty much keep this knight out of the game, and your plan is now, you're just gonna castle, you're gonna maybe double rooks here, bring the other rook over to h1, and you're gonna have a very strong attack here, with this knight pretty much unable to go anywhere. If bishop here, you can just continue with the g5, f5, and so on. The problem is, for example, capturing en passant loses the mate right away, so that's out of the question. So f4 would be incredibly strong here, and the white would definitely have compensation for his sacrificed piece. So after h4, Firouzja does not accept the sacrifice. He goes rook to e8 instead. Just continues development. And now Duda starts remaneuvering the knight. Knight back to h3. We have knight to a6 and now a3, taking away the b4 square from Firouzja's knight. And now sort of an unprincipled move, but it is justified. Here Firouzja plays d captures on c4. And it is the strongest move recommended by the engine, so Firouzja makes the correct decision. Now, usually you do not want to release the tension in the center, you want to keep your pawn chain intact, but here, like I said, it's justified because after captures you will either ruin white's pawn structure, or after bishop captures on c4, which was played in the game, b5. So the bishop has to go back, bishop to e2, and now b4. This is where Firouzja finds his counterplay for ruining of his own pawn structure. Knight back to d1, and now b captures on a3. We have bishop captures and now knight to b4. So this was his plan with this knight to a6 maneuver. And now you either leave this knight on b4, which is a monster, or you eliminate it, but you have to part ways with your own bishop pair. So Duda, of course, decides for bishop captures on b4. We have bishop captures on b4 and now g3. preparing to either castle or maybe castle artificially with king f1 to g2. We'll see, depending on what black plays. And here, knight to g4. Here, Firouzja has some ideas of playing queen to f6, which will put additional pressure on f2. For the moment, okay, it's guarded, but it's a useful piece to have. And also, it could come with an attack on the rook on a1. So here, rook to a2, getting away from this nasty attack. And also, it will provide additional defense to the d2 pawn, which is a backwards pawn, since Duda decided willingly not to play this pawn to d3. We have queen to f6 now, continuing development. And now, while you could castle, castling just runs into g5, which could be very strong for black, or, you know, could be a very double-edged game. Whichever way you would like to, phrase it, king to f1 by Duda. He prefers to sort of artificially castle with maybe king f1 to g2. Will be a very safe square for the king, and then black might be a bit discouraged on playing g5, since opening of the h-file might favor now white due to the rook being on the h-file. So bishop to f5. Continuing development, adding more defense to the e4 pawn, and now king to g2. And now the rook might stay here, the rook might come into the game, depending on what Firouzja plays. We have rook a to d8, and now knight to c3, as there's a lot of pressure here on the d2 pawn, so knight c3, blocking the bishop's attack to the pawn, and now a5. Just solidifying that pawn here. White was unable to capture it on the previous move because the rook was also very useful here, guarding the pawn here, and if you move it, just the rook captures would be devastating. So knight to f4, an excellent square for Duda's knight, and now queen to e5. Now Firouzja needs to make room for his pieces. He needs to improve here, maybe play rook d8, bring the other rook d6, maybe bring the other rook over to d8, and then break through with g5. So rook to c1. Now the rook is no longer needed on the h-file, and rook to d6. Also the c6 pawn is now defended by the rook, so very useful move. We have queen back to d1, and knight back to f6. Now there's the threat of just bishop captures on g4, so knight back to f6, and now h5. Grabbing more space on the king's side. And rook e to d8. Now really piling up on the d2 pawn, so this knight is pretty much stuck on c3. We have knight back to b1. So now you are attacking it 3 times, but you are also defending 3 times with the rook, the knight, and the queen. And here the situation on the clock is 9 minutes for Duda and 15 minutes for Firouzja, and they still have to reach time control. It's only move 27, so 13 more moves are needed to reach time control. We have g5. So here you pretty much have to react. H captures on g6 en passant, F captures on g6, and now queen to h1, going for the h6 pawn, but king to g7, Firouzja defends, and now knight to a3, preparing to bring the knight into the game via c4. But now Firouzja says, okay, it's the bishop pair is no longer useful here, it's time to eliminate the knight could become stronger than the bishop now. So bishop captures on a3. Rook captures, and the rook might also be very vulnerable here. For example, if this queen jumps down to b2, for example, with a double attack on the pawn and on the rook, white could have some problems. So first g5, pushing even further on the king's side. Knight h5 check, we have captures, and now comes rook captures on d2. And here Firouzja is up a pawn, and Duda has to decide very, very carefully what he's about to do. He could go for something like queen to e1. He could try and trade off a pair of rooks with rook to d1 with the queen and the bishop defending it, but he decides to win back material with rook captures on c6, and this just doesn't work for him. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the strongest move for Firouzja while I give you a couple of seconds, and while I also have a nice sip of my water. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that this bishop was in the way of the rook's plan to attack the f2 square. So when you put this idea with the idea that this rook is on a light square together, you find the move bishop to d7. You don't really care about the rook, you just want to move your bishop away from the f-file without wasting time. So you attack the rook now has to move. Problem is, if you move, let's say, rook c1 or something, yes, rook to g6 looks very interesting, but let's say you move back rook to c1, rook f8 is extremely strong. Now you have to defend it. Let's say we go rook to f1, now queen b2, the move we discussed, now comes with an attack on the rook and also a triple attack on the f2 pawn. Black just wins here. So Duda tried rook to g6 with check, king to h7, and now again you have a problem. For example, let's say bishop to e8 is coming. This will be deadly. So let's say you try something like rook to a6. You move the rook. You hope nothing bad happens. Here black actually has this very nice rook captures on f2. That's the problem in most of these lines. King captures, rook to f8 with check, king g2, and now again queen to b2 with check. You're not interested in the rook. You're gonna checkmate white. King g1, queen to f2 will be checkmate. So there are big problems here. So it's hard to decide what to do. Here, queen to c1 was played, trying to get the queen into the game. Also now the rook is under attack, but the problem is this bishop to e8 now comes with full force, which is what he plays. Now the rook is under attack. If you move the rook, the bishop is under attack. Also the rooks now defend each other, and there wasn't really much Duda could have done here. So there really isn't a good move here. You're gonna lose material. So Duda tried rook captures on a5, give up the rook this way, queen captures on a5, and now queen to c4, of course threatening queen to g8 mate, but Firouzja is winning here, so just capturing the rook is sufficient for a win here. But feel free to pause the video and try to find the move Firouzja played, which is just a bit more forcing. While I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on again spotting the sacrifice we already mentioned. It's a rook captures on f2. For those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook captures on f2 with check. This is what Firouzja played. King captures, and now queen to f5 with check. And it was in this position that young Krzystzof Duda resigned the game, because now he just, he basically traded down. It's pretty much pointless to play here, and there are no tricks, there are no complications. The material is too low on the board, and there's nothing to be done here. So it was in this position on move 39, one move before time control, that young Krzystzof Duda resigned the game, and yet another great victory for young Alireza Firouzja. Like I said, here if you move the king, let's say king here, now you captures, and you're just up a whole rook. There are no tricks here. Sorry, not queen captures, but king captures. You don't want to run into queen c7 check here. You don't have any options. You will be able to deliver a few checks, but black will just simply hide, and that's we could just check here. Maybe if you check here, rook can block, the queen defends the rook, and that's excellent. White is getting mated. So yeah, after this queen to f5 move with check, Duda resigned, and what a game by two of them. Remember, it's never it's not enough for one player to play well to create a beautiful game. Both players have to do their best. And we also have the standings after round 7, since I don't think we show the standings all that often. So here are the standings. Vidit in first place, since he defeated Firouzja in that beautiful win, achieving a winning position after 12 moves. Vidit with 5 out of 7, then Nikita Vitigov and Alireza Firouzja with 4 out of 7, David Anton Giharo and young Krzystzof Duda and Sam Shanklin with 3.5 out of 7, Marcus Rager and David Navarra and Pental Harikrishna with 3 out of 7, and in last place Niels Grandelius with 2.5 out of 7. So yeah, that's those are the standings. And I would just like to mention, for those of you who are still asking when the subscribers video will be finished, very soon. We had some problems. The first editor that was editing it couldn't finish it, and then we had to start over, and then a whole thing got complicated, but it should be finished fairly quickly. So sorry about that. I was really hoping to post it much sooner than the previous 2 years, but it's just never simple to finish it. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and then some of the info I've provided before and after the game. I would like to thank Harold Klein, Frank Pluij, Anis Bishara, Jacques Wenger, and Georg Mila for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Prague Chess Masters, continuing, of course, the Paul Morphy saga, and to check up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.